I was reborn in 1977. The brigade loudspeakers were hoarsely calling out the name of the last educated youth to return to the city when, in front of everyone, Jason Reed handed over the application form that represented his future and destiny to his childhood sweetheart, April White, who was sobbing with tears streaming down her face. He held my hand tightly, guilt flooding his eyes. "Lena, wait for me for 2 years. Once I'm settled, I'll come back for you. April is weak, and I really can't rest easy leaving her here alone." In my last life, I believed those empty words, and ended up waiting until I froze to death in the harsh northeast winter. Before I died, I heard that he and April had long since married in the city and already had children, living as the model couple admired by everyone. And me? I was nothing more than the foolish heroine, forgotten in the corner of their love story. In this life, as I looked at his deceitful face, my stomach twisted in disgust. Calmly, I pulled my hand back, said nothing, and forced my way through the crowd toward Mrs. Warren, the matchmaker who was waiting anxiously beneath the tree at the village entrance. "Mrs. Warren, about the Grant family's proposal. I agree." The wrinkles on her face blossomed into a smile like a chrysanthemum. "Oh, Lena, you've really come to your senses. Let me tell you, that Grant boy may have an injured leg, but he's a proper battalion-level officer. If you marry him, you'll be an officer's wife, never worrying about food or clothing. So many would envy you." She hadn't even finished speaking when Jason's furious shout came from behind. "Lena, are you insane?" He rushed over and clamped his hand around my wrist, his grip so strong it felt like my bones might break. His bloodshot eyes blazed with anger, confusion, and a fear he himself didn't recognize. "Do you even know what you're saying? Noah Grant is a cripple. He'll be stuck in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. Just to spite me, you'd marry a useless man and throw your own life away?" April hurried after him, clutching weakly at his sleeve, her eyes red as she looked at me with pitiful desperation. "Lena, don't blame Jason. It's all my fault. If you're angry, then hit me, scold me, but please don't joke about your own happiness." What a touching performance, a moving act of deep affection. The villagers watching the scene began to whisper. Lena must have lost her mind. Of course, who wouldn't snap if the sure thing slipped away? Of all men to marry, she chose that half-dead fellow from the military compound, and they say his temper's strange too. I glared coldly at the shameless pair, then shook off Jason's hand. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried clearly to everyone present. "First, Jason Reed, the return quota is yours. Whom you give it to is your choice. I have no right to interfere. Second, whom I marry is my choice, and it has nothing to do with you." I paused, shifting my gaze to April White, who shrank back under my eyes. "And lastly, I am not acting out of spite. Nor am I joking. Comrade Noah Grant is a war hero who defended our country. He is not useless. Show him some respect." With that, I ignored them, my face hard as stone, and turned to Mrs. Warren. "Ma'am, please, let's go to the Grant family right now and give them our answer." "All right," she responded loudly, as if afraid I might change my mind. We turned and left, while behind me Jason's enraged voice rang out. "Lena, you'll regret this. You'll definitely regret this." But what I regretted most was in my past life, placing all my hope on him, only to die in despair after endless waiting and illness. Noah Grant was the only son of the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Hawaiian Military District. At just 25, he was already a decorated battalion-level operations officer. If it hadn't been for the border clash a year ago, where he was wounded in both legs while protecting his comrades, his future would have been limitless. Now confined to a wheelchair, he had withdrawn from the front lines, his nature growing withdrawn and cold. In the military compound, Noah Grant had become someone everyone pitied yet avoided. To find him someone who could care for him, the Grant family spread the word that any girl willing to marry him would be granted an urban household registration, a stable job, and a generous dowry. But even with such tempting conditions, few women were willing. Who would risk her entire life marrying a man whose legs were disabled and whose temper was notoriously difficult? Mrs. Warren, the matchmaker, had cast her net wide before finally landing on me, the orphaned, rootless, educated youth with no father, no mother, and no one to rely on. In my previous life, I saw this proposal as the ultimate humiliation. I rejected it outright, stubbornly waiting for Jason Reed to come for me. But in the end, I waited for nothing. This time, however, this marriage was my only springboard to escape this land and break free of my doomed fate. Mrs. Warren worked with remarkable speed. That very afternoon, she brought the Grant family's reply and betrothal gifts to me. 300 yuan, several bolts of cloth, and piles of candy and pastries. In an era where the average monthly income was barely 20 or 30 yuan, this was undeniably a fortune. The person in charge of the educated youth station stared wide-eyed at the dowry, immediately approved 3 days leave for me, and told me to prepare for the wedding. When the news spread, the entire station exploded. Some sympathized, some sneered, but most were eaten up with envy. 300 yuan. I couldn't earn that in 10 years. She's stepping straight into heaven, turning into a city resident overnight. Not just that, she'll be an officer's wife. Takes luck to land a deal like that, but what's the point of spending your life with a cripple? I ignored all the gossip. Quietly, I packed the few belongings I had. An old wooden trunk, a handful of faded clothes, and the pair of gold bangles my mother had left me. In my past life, I had sold those bangles to scrape together Jason Reed's travel expenses to return to the city, only to later discover he hadn't needed that money at all. He had only wanted to test how deeply I loved him. How laughable. That night, Jason came to me again. He looked haggard, his chin covered with stubble, his eyes bloodshot. "Lena, stop this nonsense and come back with me," he rasped, blocking my doorway. "I'm not making trouble," I said calmly, meeting his gaze. "You're still mad at me." He grew agitated. "I admit I was wrong to give the quota to April, but I had no choice. She has heart disease. The doctor said she couldn't stay in the countryside any longer. I couldn't just watch her die." The same excuses again. In my last life, I had been deceived by that false tenderness, foolish enough to believe he was a man of loyalty and righteousness. Only later did I learn that April's heart was perfectly healthy enough to give him a son and a daughter, healthy enough to share in his wealth and glory, and live to a ripe old age. "That's your concern," I said coldly. "Jason Reed, we are finished." "No, we're not," he shook his head stubbornly. "Lena, believe me, you're the one I love. Wait for me, 2 years at most. I swear I'll come back and marry you in grand style." "That won't be necessary." I sidestepped him, trying to shut the door. "I'm getting married in 3 days. You don't need to concern yourself with me anymore." But he pressed hard against the door, his face twisted in pain, his voice raw. "Lena, must you ruin yourself like this? What can he give you? He's not even a real man." That was the spark that ignited the anger I had swallowed for 2 lifetimes. I snapped my head up, my eyes sharp as blades. "I don't know if he can give me happiness, but I do know this. He won't tell me he loves me while handing the chance to live to someone else. Jason Reed, take your cheap affection and empty promises away." They disgust me. With every ounce of strength in my body, I slammed the door with a resounding bang, shutting his shocked and wounded face outside. Then silence settled, heavy and long. Then came the sound of his defeated footsteps as he left. I leaned against the door and slowly slid down to the floor. At last, the tears I had been holding back spilled freely. Not for him, but as a belated farewell to the hopelessly foolish girl I had been in my past life. 3 days later, the wedding took place right on schedule. There was no elaborate ceremony, no hall full of guests. The Grant family sent a jeep to fetch me. Driving was a young orderly named Lee. I put on a brand new red polyester shirt, a gift Mrs. Warren had prepared especially for me, and braided my hair neatly into 2 long plaits. Sitting in the jolting jeep, I watched the fields and villages fly by outside the window, my heart unusually calm. This was the place where I had poured out 8 years of youth, the place I once thought would be my grave in a foreign land. Now I was finally leaving it behind. Jason Reed did not appear. I heard that he and April White had boarded the train to the city just the day before. That was fine. Out of sight, out of mind. The jeep drove me straight into the legendary military compound. Red brick buildings with green tiled roofs, clean cement roads, soldiers in uniform coming and going, children laughing and playing in the yards. Everything here was a stark contrast to the life I had known, full of order and vitality. The vehicle stopped in front of a 2-story house. "We're here, ma'am," Lee said, lifting my trunk for me. his face carrying a trace of pity and sympathy. "This is Staff Officer Grant's home." I nodded, pushed open the worn iron gate, and walked inside. The yard held a few bare trees, and in the corner was a pile of miscellaneous junk, giving off a desolate air. The doors of the house were tightly shut, and the entire place radiated a coldness that warned strangers away. This was to be my new home. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy wooden door. Inside, the light was dim. A faint smell of disinfectant mixed with medicinal herbs filled the air. The furnishings were sparse. A table, a few chairs, a calligraphy scroll on the wall that read, "Serve the country with utmost loyalty." A man sat with his back to me in a wheelchair by the window. He wore a faded old military uniform. His frame was lean but straight, and even sitting, it was easy to imagine the commanding presence he must once have carried. Sunlight poured through the glass, outlining him in a golden glow, but it did nothing to melt the layer of cold desolation that clung to him. He didn't turn around, only spoke coldly, his voice brittle as ice and hoarse from disuse. "Put the things down and leave." I froze, then understood. He must have thought I was there to deliver something. I set my trunk by the door and walked toward him, trying to make my voice as gentle as possible. "Hello, my name is Lena. From today on, I'm your wife." At that, he finally turned his head slowly. The moment I saw his face, my breath caught. I had heard that Noah Grant was handsome, but I hadn't imagined he would look like this. His features were sharply cut, every line precise and defined. His brows were thick and strong, his nose high and straight, his dark eyes deep as a still pool. Yet in those eyes, there was no emotion at all, only a dead, inky emptiness. His skin was pale from long absence of sunlight, his thin lips pressed tightly together, his jawline taut as if carved in stone. He was like an eagle whose wings had been broken by fate. Even fallen to the dust, he still carried a proud and aloof bearing. His eyes swept over me, sharp as a surgeon's scalpel, as though dissecting me inside and out. After a long moment, the corner of his lips tugged into a cold, mocking smile. "A wife who sells herself to a cripple just for an urban household registration. How pragmatic of you." His words were cutting, but I didn't get angry. I knew he was bristling with thorns on purpose, using cruelty to hide his own fragility and despair. Once he had been the favored son of heaven. Now he had fallen to this. His pride must have been crushed countless times, having to rely on his parents to bargain for a wife with promises of money and benefits. I met his gaze calmly. "Comrade Noah Grant, let's make a deal." He raised his brows, clearly surprised by my reaction. "A deal?" I nodded. "I know you don't want this marriage, and you don't want a stranger disrupting your life. I don't want to use marriage to tie you down either, so we can come to an agreement." I held up 2 fingers. 2 years. We'll be husband and wife in name only for 2 years. During that time, I'll do my best to take care of your daily needs and play the role of a wife. After 2 years, if you still can't accept me, or if you find someone more suitable, we'll divorce. By then, I'll already have an urban household registration and a job, and I'll be able to live independently. We'll both get what we need, and neither of us will owe the other anything. His eyes deepened as he stared at me in silence, as though weighing the truth of my words. After a long pause, he finally said slowly, "You're sharper than I expected." "I'm just practical," I replied evenly. "Fine." He gave a short nod, which counted as his agreement. "The room on the west side is mine, the east side is yours. Without my permission, don't enter my room. And another thing, I don't like noise. Keep your mouth under control." "Okay," I agreed readily. "And," he added, turning his wheelchair so his back faced me, "I don't eat onions, ginger, garlic, cilantro, or fatty meat." Such a picky list of demands. I bit back the urge to roll my eyes and simply nodded. "Got it." He said nothing more, maneuvered his wheelchair into the west bedroom, and slammed the door shut with a bang. Staring at the tightly closed door, I shrugged helplessly. Clearly, life with my new husband was not going to be easy, but that was fine. I had patience. I rolled up my sleeves and began tidying the cold, desolate house. It hadn't been thoroughly cleaned in a long time, and a thin layer of dust coated everything. I started with my own bedroom. It wasn't large, just a wooden bed and a chipped wardrobe, but I carefully wiped down every corner. Then I moved on to the living room and the kitchen. The kitchen was even worse. Cold stoves, only a few bundles of dried noodles and some hard, stale buns. It was obvious he had been living perfunctorily, barely caring for himself. I worked non-stop until the whole house was fresh and bright, then finally straightened my back and let out a long breath. The sky outside had already turned dusky. From my trunk, I pulled out a little white flower and a piece of cured pork. Wedding gifts my friends from the youth station had pooled together for me. After thinking for a moment, I decided to make hand-pulled noodles. I mixed the dough, rolled it, and sliced it into strips. Then I diced the pork and stir-fried it with the last bit of green vegetables into a fragrant topping. Just as I set 2 steaming bowls of noodles on the table, Noah's door opened. He must have been hungry because he wheeled himself out. He stopped short when he saw the food on the table. "Come eat," I called to him. He didn't answer, only maneuvered his chair silently to the table. I had made sure to pick out all the green onions and cilantro from his bowl. He looked down at the white noodles, bright vegetables, and red cubes of meat, and something flickered faintly in his eyes. He picked up his chopsticks, lifted a strand of noodles, and hesitated a moment before putting it into his mouth. After that, his movements didn't stop until the bowl was empty. He even drank the broth down to the last drop. That was the first meal we shared as husband and wife. We exchanged no words, only the faint clink of chopsticks and bowls. When he finished, he remained silent, turning his wheelchair to head back to his room. "Wait a second," I called after him. He stopped and turned his head toward me. "Your legs? Would you let me take a look?" I asked carefully. His face darkened instantly, and the air around him grew so heavy it was suffocating. His gaze cut into me like an ice blade. "Who gave you the nerve?" I knew I had touched the most sensitive scar in his heart, but I had to, because I remembered all too clearly. Shortly after my death in my last life, a piece of news had shaken the entire country. An old village doctor, who had lived in seclusion, used a nearly lost acupuncture technique to cure the damaged nerves in the legs of a battle hero. That hero was none other than Noah Grant. Not only did he stand up again, but he also returned to the army, and in the decades that followed, he rose step by step to become a legendary figure in the military. I didn't know where to find that old doctor, but in my last life I had studied some basic massage and therapeutic techniques from our barefoot village doctor, just to help Jason Reed with his health. I didn't dare dream of curing Noah, but at least I could try to help relieve his muscle atrophy and lay some groundwork for future treatment. "I don't mean anything else by it," I said, meeting his icy gaze and making my voice as sincere as I could. "I learned a few massage techniques from our village doctor. Maybe I could help improve your circulation, ease the pain a little." "I don't need it." His rejection was cold and hard, thick with resistance and disgust. "Stop entertaining thoughts you shouldn't have. Just do your part." Without another glance, he wheeled himself back into his room and slammed the door, leaving me shut outside again. I looked at that closed door and let out a helpless sigh. Conquering this iceberg was going to be a long battle. Over the next few days, the rhythm of our life settled into a pattern. I cleaned the house, washed clothes, and cooked meals. He locked himself in his room, only coming out for meals or the bathroom. We exchanged barely 3 sentences in a whole day. His face remained cold toward me, but the meals I cooked, he always finished down to the last bite. That was a start. Life in the military compound was completely different from the countryside. Neighbors weren't close, but since we saw each other often, there was always a polite nod or greeting. Next door lived Mrs. Zhang, wife of the commissar of the division headquarters. Everyone called her Sister Zhang. She was warm-hearted and straightforward. Seeing me busy alone inside and out, she often came by to lend a hand or bring vegetables from her own garden. "Lena, you're really a good girl. It's Noah's blessing to have married you," Sister Zhang said one day as she helped me pick through vegetables. I smiled. "You flatter me, Sister Zhang." "It's not flattery at all." She lowered her voice. "You don't know. Ever since Noah came back injured, he's like a different person. He used to be such a bright, cheerful young man. Now, sigh. His parents worry themselves sick. They even hired 2 caretakers before, but both of them left, furious with him. The fact that you can endure his bad temper is no small thing." "I understand he has bitterness in his heart," I said softly. Just then, a sharp, mocking voice drifted in from outside the courtyard. "Oh my, Sister Zhang, here you are again, teaching others how to be the perfect wife and mother." We both turned. At the gate stood a middle-aged woman in a gaudy floral shirt, smirking with glee at the scene. It was Mrs. Liu, wife of the logistics director and the compound's most notorious gossip. Sister Zhang's face darkened. "Wang Shui, watch your mouth." Mrs. Liu curled her lip and looked me up and down with open disdain. "So this is the new little bride of Staff Officer Grant, huh? Pretty enough, I'll give her that. But I wonder how it feels, spending every day stuck with a patient." She bit down hard on the word patient, the malice dripping from her tone. Before I could respond, Sister Zhang shot up, furious. "Wang Shui, what nonsense are you spouting? Noah is a hero. If you dare slander him again, I'll tear that foul mouth of yours apart." "What nonsense? I'm just stating the obvious," Mrs. Liu said with feigned innocence. "Everyone in the compound knows his legs are ruined. This little wife of his is nothing more than a caretaker, or maybe," her eyes gleamed with cruelty, "she only married in for the Grant family's power and status." Sister Zhang trembled with rage, about to charge at her. I quickly grabbed her arm and held her back. Then I turned to Mrs. Liu, meeting her eyes calmly, and smiled. "You're right, Mrs. Liu. I did marry Noah for the Grant family." Both she and Sister Zhang froze in shock. Mrs. Liu clearly hadn't expected me to admit it so bluntly, and for a moment she was at a loss for words. I continued slowly. "Noah is a battle hero, and his father, the deputy chief of staff, is a great man who defended our country. To marry into such a heroic family, well, that's fortune earned over several lifetimes. Unlike some people who marry a warehouse manager and suddenly think they're somebody, spending their days gossiping about others. Aren't you afraid the wind will twist your tongue right off?" You're calling my husband a warehouse manager?" Mrs. Liu's face turned the color of pig liver. Her husband was the logistics director, which in plain terms meant he managed warehouses. That was exactly the sore spot she couldn't stand anyone touching. "If you feel the shoe fits, then wear it," I said brightly, smiling even wider. "Mrs. Liu, instead of meddling in our household, why not worry more about your own? I heard the higher-ups are going to audit the warehouse accounts soon. You'd better remind Director Liu to be careful, or else something might be exposed." I had made that up on the spot purely to rattle her, but the effect was astonishing. Mrs. Liu's face drained of color, panic flickered in her eyes, and her lips trembled as if searching for a retort. At last, she only glared at me viciously, spat out, "You just wait," and slunk away in embarrassment. Sister Zhang stared at me, dumbfounded, before finally reacting. She raised her thumb and exclaimed, "Lena, you're amazing. Just a few words and you shut that viper right up. So satisfying." I only smiled, saying nothing. With people like her, the weaker you acted, the more they pressed their advantage. Only by being harder than they were, could you silence them. What I hadn't expected was that this little clash had been witnessed entirely by Noah Grant from the upstairs window. That evening, during dinner, Noah did something unprecedented. He spoke to me first. "About today? Thank you." His voice was still cold, but compared to before, there was the faintest hint of warmth. I was a little surprised, then shook my head. "I didn't do it for you. I just don't like people pointing fingers at me." He glanced at me, but said nothing more, lowering his head and eating silently. The atmosphere returned to its usual stillness. After dinner, I went about clearing the table while he started to wheel himself back to his room. "Wait," I called again. He stopped, his brows tightening ever so slightly as if weary of my constant interruptions. I carried over a basin of freshly boiled hot water and crouched down in front of him under his startled gaze. "What are you doing?" His voice turned instantly wary, hoarse with tension. "Don't be nervous. I just want to soak your feet in hot water," I said gently, looking up at him. "It can promote circulation. It's good for your legs." His body went rigid as stone, both hands clamped tight on the armrests of his wheelchair. His eyes brimmed with resistance and humiliation. I said I don't need it. I looked straight into his eyes and spoke clearly, one word at a time. "Noah, I know what you're thinking. You believe your legs are ruined. You don't want anyone to see them. You don't want anyone to touch them. Isn't that right?" His pupils contracted sharply. You think shutting yourself away means you can pretend nothing happened, but you're only lying to yourself. Your legs are still here. They're part of your body. The more you run from them, the more they'll become a demon that torments you. My voice was soft, but every word landed like a hammer on his heart. His jaw clenched, veins standing out on his forehead, eyes filled with pain and struggle. I said nothing more, only reached out and gently held his ankle. His body jolted violently as though struck by lightning, his first instinct to pull back. I tightened my grip, refusing to let him escape. His foot was icy cold, devoid of any warmth. The skin was pale from long immobility. I carefully slipped off his socks and gently lowered his feet into the basin of warm water. The heat rose past his ankles, and his stiff body seemed to ease just a fraction. With a towel between my hands and his skin, I began to massage him lightly, moving from the Yongquan point on the sole of his foot to his ankle, then up toward his calf. My technique wasn't professional, but I put my whole heart into it. He didn't say a word the entire time, but his body stayed tense, his breathing quickening little by little. I could feel the defenses in his heart crumbling, inch by inch. Just when I thought he might remain silent forever, his hoarse voice came from above my head. Why? Why what? I asked without looking up, keeping my hands moving steadily. Why are you being so good to me? His voice was rough, uncertain, we're only a transaction. I paused, then lifted my head to meet his complicated gaze. Because you're my husband, I answered seriously. No matter how our beginning looked, as long as we're husband and wife, I'll fulfill my duty as a wife. And more than that, you're a hero. That word seemed to touch the softest, most hidden place in his heart. For a fleeting moment, the ice in his eyes melted. He turned his head away, refusing to look at me, and muttered so low it was nearly inaudible, "Do as you wish." From that day on, Noah no longer resisted my presence so fiercely. He still didn't talk much, and his face remained expressionless, but when I soaked and massaged his feet each evening, he no longer sat rigid, as if facing a battlefield. Sometimes when I pressed a particular point, he would grunt from the pain, and I knew that was a good sign. Pain meant the nerves weren't completely dead. A faint hope began to flicker inside me. Beyond massage, I tried every way I could to improve his diet. I knew how much his body had been weakened by the injury. Using some of the dowry money, I asked Sister Zhang to buy free-range chickens and fresh ribs from the countryside. Every day I cooked a different kind of soup: chicken broth, bone broth, fish soup. The kitchen was always filled with rich aromas. At first, he frowned and scolded me for wasting money, but each time I set the bowl before him, he silently drank every drop. Day by day, I saw his complexion change, color slowly returning to his cheeks, his spirit brighter than when we first met. Our relationship began to shift quietly in this silence. He no longer shut himself in his room all the time. Sometimes while I cleaned, he would sit by the living room window reading a book, sunlight pouring over him, softening his whole figure. Occasionally, he would even speak first. "The soup was too salty today. You organized the books in the cabinet? Tomorrow, I want dumplings." Trivial words, perhaps, but to me they were monumental progress. A month slipped by. One day, as usual, I was massaging his legs. When I pressed a point near his left knee, his calf twitched involuntarily. It was slight, but both of us felt it. We froze. I lifted my head, staring at him in disbelief, and for the first time his face showed shock and confusion. He lowered his head, staring hard at the leg that had been lifeless for more than a year, as if he couldn't believe what had just happened. "Did it move?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. His breathing quickened, and the grip on his wheelchair was so tight that his knuckles turned white. I took a deep breath, suppressing the joy bursting in my chest, and pressed the same point again. Once, twice, a third time. His calf twitched again, slightly but unmistakably. It moved. Noah, it really moved. Tears spilled uncontrollably as I grabbed his hand in excitement. His whole body trembled faintly. He looked from his leg to me, and for the first time in more than a year, a flame of hope flickered in his dark eyes. He turned his hand over, gripping mine with surprising strength, his hoarse voice carrying the faintest tremor. "Lena, thank you." The discovery cracked through the silence of our small home like a thunderclap. From that moment on, Noah's entire demeanor began to change. He was no longer that living corpse who didn't care about anything. Light had returned to his eyes. He began to cooperate with my treatments of his own accord. Every day, without me having to remind him, he would prepare hot water himself. During massages, no matter how much it hurt, he clenched his teeth and endured it silently. Besides the massages, he also started trying some rehabilitation exercises. At first, he only attempted to stand by bracing himself on his arms while I supported him. The process was grueling. His legs, long unused, had wasted away badly and couldn't bear the weight of his body. Each attempt at standing was sheer torture. Sweat soaked his clothes in no time, and the muscles of his arms and back trembled from the strain. More than once he nearly collapsed, but I never let go, holding him tightly around the waist, using my frail body to give him the firmest support. "Don't give up, Noah. You can do it," I whispered in his ear again and again. He gritted his teeth and tried over and over, from a few seconds to half a minute, then to a full minute. His perseverance exceeded my imagination. Finally, one afternoon a month later, he managed to stand on his own, leaning against the wall. Though it lasted barely more than 10 seconds, though his legs still shook uncontrollably, he had truly stood up by his own strength. When he sat back in his wheelchair, both of us were drenched in sweat, panting hard. He leaned against the chair, his chest heaving, but for the first time in so long, a genuine smile broke across his face. That smile was like a ray of sunshine lighting up the whole room and shining straight into my heart. "I stood up, Lena," he said. "Yes, I saw it," I replied with a smile, though my eyes had grown misty. From that day on, Noah's road to recovery was officially underway. He practiced standing every day, holding it longer and longer. Slowly he began to try moving his legs, taking steps with my support. One step, then another. Each one was incredibly difficult, yet unbelievably determined. Our small home filled daily with the heavy sound of his footsteps and his ragged breathing. Even the neighbors began to notice the change. They saw Staff Officer Grant, once shut away all day, now shuffling across the courtyard with his wife's help. Everyone was stunned. "My God, he can walk again! It's a miracle. And that new wife of his, she's amazing!" In an instant, I became the center of attention in the compound. Mrs. Liu, who had mocked me before, now greeted me with a fawning smile, calling me Little Sister Lena more warmly than anyone. Sister Jiang was even happier for me, clasping my hands and praising me over and over. I only smiled faintly. Deep down, I knew this wasn't because of me. It was because Noah had never truly given up on himself. I was only the one who lit the fuse for him. The days passed quietly, full of hope. Noah's body grew stronger and stronger. He could already walk a short distance on his own with crutches. He also talked more, and we began to chat like real husband and wife. He would tell me amusing stories from the army or silly memories from his childhood. I shared with him bits of life from the youth station. Our relationship had long surpassed the transaction we had agreed on, becoming closer and closer. Though we still slept in separate rooms, we both knew the invisible wall between us had already crumbled. Then one day, I received an unexpected package. It was from Jason Reed. Opening it, I found a polyester dress, fashionable for the time, and a letter. In it, he poured out endless longing for me, then complained about how unsatisfying his life in the city had been. He wrote that April White had changed completely after returning to the city. She looked down on him for being just an ordinary worker with a low wage and no future, quarreling with him every day. Their marriage was falling apart. At the end of the letter, he confessed his love for me once more. He wrote that his biggest regret was giving away his return quota back then. He said he would find a way to get a divorce and then come back for me. "Lena, wait for me. I'll definitely give you happiness." Staring at Jason's letter, I felt nothing but bitter irony. In my last life, I had wasted everything on these empty promises, believing them until my death. This time, I didn't bother replying. I threw the letter and that polyester dress straight into the stove, watching them burn into ashes. That evening, Noah seemed to notice my low spirits. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" he asked. I shook my head. "Nothing. I just thought of some unpleasant people." He was silent for a while before saying suddenly, "That Jason Reed is no good." I looked at him in surprise. "You know him?" "Yes." He nodded. "Someone mentioned him before. Even while he was with you, he was tangled up with April White." This time, too, it was the White family pulling strings behind the scenes for his return. He's nothing more than an opportunist who will throw away love for the sake of his career. My heart clenched, as though pierced by a sharp blade. So he had known everything all along. He didn't press me further, only looked at me quietly, with a faint trace of pity in his eyes. "It's all in the past," I said, taking a deep breath before smiling at him. "Now, I'm your wife, Noah." He held my gaze for a long time before nodding slowly. In that moment, I felt as if all those unbearable memories had truly begun to fade far into the distance. In the blink of an eye, summer of 1978 arrived. The winds of reform and opening up swept across the country, filling the air with a restless, vibrant energy. Noah's legs had nearly recovered. Though his walk was still a bit stiff, he no longer needed crutches. His old commander, the military district's chief of staff, came personally to visit him. Seeing Noah walk on his own again, the old man's eyes brimmed with tears, and right there he approved Noah's return to the army and arranged new work for him. The news of Noah's reinstatement spread quickly through the compound. Suddenly our home was flooded with visitors. The very people who once avoided us now came bearing gifts, eager to curry favor. Watching their false smiles, I only found it laughable. Noah clearly disliked such social climbing as well. He simply ordered young Lee, the orderly, to stand guard at the door and send everyone away. Once the house was quiet again, he looked at me and said earnestly, "Lena, thank you. Without you, I wouldn't be here today. We're husband and wife. Don't thank me like a stranger," I said as I helped straighten his uniform. He caught my hand, his gaze burning into me. "Lena, let's not sleep in separate rooms anymore, okay?" My face flamed red, my heart pounding wildly. I lowered my head and whispered a soft That night, I moved into his room. He held me tightly as though he wanted to fuse me into his very bones. His kiss trembled, hot and fierce. "Lena, I love you," he whispered in my ear, again and again. In the darkness, I smiled through tears. After 2 lifetimes, I had finally heard this vow spoken from the heart. When Noah returned to the army, he was busier than ever, but whenever he had a free moment, he came home. He would bring me little fashionable trinkets from the city, clumsily try to help with housework, or hold me close at night, murmuring stories from the barracks. Our days were simple, yet sweet. I didn't stay idle either. I knew my time was coming, and I didn't want to spend my whole life as just an officer's wife. I had my own ambitions and dreams. Using Noah's connections, I rented a small storefront in the city. Then I sold the gold bangles my mother had left me to raise my first bit of startup capital. I opened a clothing shop. At the time, most people's wardrobes were still conservative, dominated by dull blacks, whites, and grays. But with an aesthetic vision decades ahead, I designed fresh styles in bright, lively colors. At first, business was slow. Many thought my clothes were far too unconventional. At first, few dared to wear my clothes. But soon, as minds began to open and young people started seeking fashion and individuality, my shop became the most stylish place in the entire city. Business grew hotter by the day, and before long, I had earned my very first fortune. I was no longer that penniless country girl, Lena, the educated youth, but Boss Lena, a well-known clothing store owner. Noah supported my career wholeheartedly. On his days off, he would come to help me move stock. He even used a month's allowance to buy me an imported sewing machine. "My Lena should do what she loves," he always told me with a smile. With both love and career thriving, I felt like the happiest woman in the world. But just when I thought life would stay that beautiful forever, an uninvited guest arrived to shatter the peace. It was April White. That day, I was in the shop checking accounts when she pushed open the door. She looked far more haggard than she had in the countryside, wearing a faded old dress. Her face was pale, sickly even, with none of the delicate charm she once displayed. The moment she saw me, hatred and resentment flashed in her eyes, but she quickly replaced it with a pitiful, tearful look. "Lena," she called in a trembling voice. I didn't even bother lifting my eyes, only asked flatly, "What do you want?" "Lena, I'm here to apologize on Jason's behalf." Her eyes reddened. "Back then, it was us who wronged you. After we returned to the city, life has been awful. Jason, he's always thinking about you." I answered with a cold hum, lowering my head again to my ledger. My reaction clearly caught her off guard. She froze a moment, then continued, "Lena, Jason can't hold on anymore. The factory's doing poorly. We haven't been paid in months. He's drowning in debt. Could you lend us some money? Finally, I looked up at her, my gaze as if I were watching a farce. April White, are you out of your mind? What does your suffering have to do with me? Why should I give you money? Her lips trembled, and tears rolled down her cheeks. Jason said you've always had the kindest heart. He said if I came to beg you, you would definitely help. I laughed coldly. He knows the old me very well. Unfortunately, I'm not that foolish girl anymore. My kindness is expensive. It's not something any random stray can demand. Her face drained of color, clearly shocked I could speak so harshly. After a deep breath, as if steeling herself, she suddenly dropped to her knees with a thud. Lena, I'm begging you. If you lend us money, I'll give Jason back to you. We'll get divorced immediately. I know you still love him, don't you? Her shamelessness was so absurd that I actually laughed. April White, you've just redefined the word shameless for me. I rose to my feet, looking down at her. Do you think Jason Reed is some precious prize everyone's fighting over? To me, he's not even worth a piece of garbage on the roadside. I paused, then said clearly, one word at a time. I am married. My husband is Noah Grant, the best man in this world. I love him more than my own life. So pack up your pitiful thoughts and disappear with Jason from my world forever. With that, I called security, who dragged her out weeping and wailing. The shop grew quiet again. I looked out the window, my heart utterly calm. Jason Reed and April White, those two names that had once stirred up storms in my life, now meant nothing to me. I thought after this, they would finally give up. But I had underestimated Jason's persistence and his shamelessness. A few days later, he came in person. That day, Noah happened to be home on leave. We were just about to sit down to dinner when the doorbell rang. Noah went to answer it, and when he opened the door to see the ragged, emaciated man standing there, we both froze. Jason Reed, too, hadn't expected Noah to be the one who opened the door. At first, Jason froze, then his eyes blazed with fury. He shoved past Noah and stormed inside. The moment he saw me, his eyes turned red. Lena, he rasped hoarsely, reaching toward me, but Noah stepped forward immediately, blocking him like an immovable wall. Mr. Reed, show some respect, he said, his voice cold as ice. Get out of my way, Jason roared like an enraged bull. This is between me and Lena. What does it have to do with a cripple like you? The word cripple made Noah's expression darken instantly. Afraid he might lose his temper, I quickly stepped out from behind him and looked at Jason coldly. What are you doing here? Come with me, Lena. Jason's eyes were wild, almost fanatical. I know you didn't marry him with a true heart. You're just angry with me. I know you still love me. Let's start over, okay? Jason Reed, are you out of your mind? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm not crazy, he cried, desperate. Lena, I don't want anything else. My job, my future, I'll give it all up. I just want you. Let's leave here, go somewhere no one knows us, and begin again. He spoke as if he were some great hero sacrificing everything for love. But I only felt sick. Start over? I sneered. Did you forget it was you who pushed me away for the sake of your future? Now that you've failed in the city, you remember me again? What do you take me for? A spare tire to call on and discard at will? No, Lena, listen to me, I can explain. Enough, I cut him off sharply. I don't want to hear a single word from you. Jason Reed, the best decision I ever made in this life was leaving you and marrying Noah Grant. Now get out of my house. I never want to see you again. My words stabbed into him like a knife. His face went pale, his body swayed, and he muttered in shock. No, Lena, you're lying to me, aren't you? Just then, a sudden wave of nausea surged up from my stomach. I clapped a hand over my mouth, gagging uncontrollably. All three of us froze in shock. Jason's face drained from pale to ashen gray. Noah, meanwhile, was stunned for a moment, then overwhelming joy burst into his eyes. He quickly supported me, his voice trembling with excitement. Lena? He looked at me, realization dawning. I understood too. My monthly cycle was already nearly 2 months late. I might be pregnant. This sudden revelation was the final blow to Jason. He looked at Noah holding my hand, at the unspoken intimacy and trust between us. The light in his eyes dimmed bit by bit. So it's true, he whispered, stepping back as if struck. A broken smile twisted across his face, uglier than tears. You really love him, and you're carrying his child. It was as if all strength drained from his body. He crumpled, repeating over and over, "It's my fault. It's my fault." Then he staggered away like a lost soul, vanishing into the night. At last, the house was quiet again. Noah swept me into his arms, lifting me high and spinning around the living room in sheer delight. "Lena, I'm going to be a father. We're going to have a baby." His laughter was unrestrained, almost boyish. I grew dizzy from his spinning, laughing as I beat lightly on his chest. "Put me down. Careful of the baby." He stopped at once, as if waking from a dream, and gently set me on the sofa. Then he dropped to one knee, pressing his ear against my belly with a look of pure reverence and joy. "Lena." "Thank you," he whispered. He lifted his head, his eyes rimmed with red. "Thank you. Thank you for being willing to marry me, for being willing to give me a child. You and our baby are the most precious treasures of my life." I cupped his face in my hands, my heart overflowing with happiness. "Yes, Jason Reed, you were wrong. You never knew how to cherish me. The happiness you tossed away so carelessly is now what Noah and I hold as priceless." From that day forward, I became the most protected person in our home. Noah wouldn't let me tire myself with work at the shop anymore. He hired 2 experienced clerks to handle the business and took on all the household chores himself, cooking me different dishes every day. When the neighbors in the compound learned I was pregnant, they all came by with blessings and tonics. Sister Zhang often stopped in, chatting with me and sharing parenting advice. Even Noah's parents, all the way in the capital, sent big parcels of baby supplies and called to remind him to take good care of me. Everyone treated me like I was something to be cherished, like a queen held in the palm of every hand. As my belly grew day by day, Noah made it his nightly ritual to press his face against it and whisper to our baby, "Baby, I'm daddy. Be good, don't make mommy suffer. When you come out, daddy will teach you to shoot, take you to drive a tank." Watching him speak with such gentleness always made me laugh. Who would have thought this man, once as cold as ice, could turn into such a doting fool? Yes, he was convinced I was carrying a daughter. He said a girl would be like me, beautiful and smart. And I too was filled with expectation for this new life, the crystallization of our love, the continuation of our happiness. In the spring of 1979, I gave birth to a son. Though he wasn't the daughter Noah had imagined, he was so overjoyed he turned into a grinning fool, showering the baby with kisses. We named him Grant Nianan. Nian for remembrance, and for peace. We wished for him a life of safety and joy. His arrival filled our home with endless laughter. Noah became a complete child slave. Whenever he was home, he refused to let go of our son. Diaper changes, bottle feedings, he did it all, more skillfully than I did as his mother. Meanwhile, my clothing business flourished. I opened several more shops, founded my own garment factory, and created a brand under my own name, becoming a well-known businesswoman across the country. Noah, too, rose rapidly in the military. Within just a few years, his exceptional skill and leadership carried him from battalion commander to regimental commander, and then to division commander. He became the youngest, most promising general in the district. We had become the model family everyone envied in the compound. A husband with boundless prospects, a wife with a thriving career, and a lively, beloved son. Often I thought to myself, if the me from my previous life could see this, she would think it an unreachable dream. But it was real. I had changed my own fate with my own hands, seizing the happiness that belonged to me. Now and then, I heard scraps of news about Jason Reed and April White. Not long after I became pregnant, they divorced. April quickly remarried a wealthy Hong Kong businessman and disappeared from sight. Jason, however, spiraled downward. He lost his job, fell into gambling and drinking, and spent his days in a haze, living off loan sharks. A few times, he even came looking for me, but the guards at our door turned him away. After that, I heard nothing more. He became like a speck of dust, vanishing completely from my life. Time flew. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. Our son, Nianan, had grown into a tall, handsome teenager. He had inherited Noah's gift for the military and had set his sights on becoming a soldier from an early age. My fashion company had become a nationally known brand, and Noah was now a high-ranking general, carrying the weight of command on his shoulders. We left behind the little courtyard where everything began and moved into the general's residence. But in these 10 years, our love had not faded with the passage of time. Instead, it had only grown deeper, richer, and sweeter. Just like in the beginning, Noah would still massage me when I was tired, still fumble through preparing little surprises for my birthday, still kiss me tenderly every morning and every night. We were not only lovers, but also comrades in arms, and the closest of soulmates. That day was Noah's promotion ceremony. As his family, I was invited to attend. After the ceremony ended, the three of us prepared to head home. At the gates of the military compound, I suddenly saw a figure both familiar and strange. It was an old man, hair gray and matted, clothes ragged, his back hunched. He squatted in a corner by the gate, ravenously gnawing on a blackened steamed bun he had scavenged from a trash bin. A guard, finding him unsightly, was about to chase him away when the vagrant suddenly lifted his head. Our eyes met, and we both froze. That weathered, filthy face still carried faint traces of his younger self. Jason Reed. Never had I imagined that I would see him again in such a way. When he recognized me, his murky eyes suddenly lit with a desperate brightness. He dropped the bun and scrambled toward me, half crawling, half stumbling. "Lena! Lena!" he cried, hoarse and frantic. Noah immediately stepped in front of me, shielding me with his body like an unbreachable wall, while the guards rushed forward and pinned Jason to the ground. "Let me go. I came for Lena!" he screamed, thrashing wildly. I stood calmly behind Noah, watching him. His face was streaked with tears of regret and despair. "Lena, I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Please forgive me. Can't we start over?" His words tumbled out incoherently, drenched in pleading. By now, curious onlookers had gathered around, whispering and pointing at him. I gazed at this pitiful, broken man and felt nothing. Not sorrow, not pity, nothing at all. I slipped my arm through Noah's and gave him a small, genuine smile. Then, without sparing Jason a backward glance, I walked with my husband and my son to the military-plated car waiting for us. As the car pulled away, Jason's cries of despair faded into the distance. Resting my head against Noah's shoulder, I watched the scenery rush past outside the window, my heart filled with peace. Bookmark, Jason Reed. You will never understand. The moment I chose to turn away, a gulf as vast as mountains and oceans lay forever between us. 2 lifetimes, and you were nothing more than a chapter I had already closed.